Right, everyone, can you settle down, please? Thank you. Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Janetta Soshan and I chair the meeting. Right, before we start, I've got some announcements to make. In the case of a fire, a bell will ring continuously. If this occurs, please leave the building immediately, following the green fire exit signs, out to the assembly point, which is by the War Memorial on Duke Street. If anyone requires assistance, please let me know. Lifts should not be used. Please remain at the assembly point and do not attempt to return to the building until you've been advised it's safe to do so. The toilets are situated on the landing at the top of the main staircase and on the ground floor in the customer service area. Please turn off your mobile phones during the meeting. Anyone attending this meeting is entitled to film it, but only councillors, officers and anyone sitting around these tables may be filmed. Members of the public should not be filmed, so please ensure cameras are pointed only in this direction. The meeting is also being broadcast via YouTube and recorded. When speaking, may I remind the committee to ensure you turn on your microphones and speak closely into them. A red light will appear on the middle button to indicate that your microphone is switched on. When finished speaking, please remember to turn your microphone off again. Thank you. Right, apologies for absence. Can I have those, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've had apologies from Councillors Large and Sampson. We have Councillors for Scona and Walsh as their substitutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. All members are reminded that they must disclose any interest they know they have in the items of business on the meeting's agenda, and they must do so at this point or as soon as they become aware of the interest. Councillor Dobson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've called in the applications for items number 7, 8, 9 and 10, and therefore I will be speaking on the public side. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, the minutes. To consider the minutes of the meeting on 16th of April 2024. Is it your wish that I sign those as a true record? Thank you. Right, there is a public question time, but I'm sure most of you will wish to speak when your item is called. Is there anyone who suggested they speak at this point?
No, everyone's happy to speak at their item.
Okay, thank you. Right, we'll go straight to item 6, 24-00114 FUL, land east of Mill Lane, Great Leys, Chelmsford, Essex. Can I have the officer's report, please?
Good evening, Chair. This is the presentation for item 6 on your agenda. Application reference 24/00114 FUL, land east of Mill Lane, Great Leys. The site is indicatively shown on this slide with a red star. It lies to the east of the defined settlement of Great Leys, which is outlined in red. The The site for the purposes of planning policy lies within the rural area. Local plan policies S11 and DM8 are of relevance. Local planning policies seek to restrict development in the countryside and protect the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. The site is located within an area of open countryside. The nearest residential properties lie to the south along Boreham Road and can be seen on the site plan shown. It's a rectangular shaped parcel of undeveloped land on the eastern side of Mill Lane. The eastern boundary, the western boundary of the site is shared with Mill Lane, and there are trees along the boundaries of the site and within it. Paragraph 84E of the National Planning Policy Framework relates to houses of a design of exceptional quality in the countryside. In order for a proposal to meet the policy requirement, there's four tests outlined on the slide, and these all must be met. These are that the design is truly outstanding, reflecting the highest standards in architecture. It will help to raise standards of design more generally in rural areas. It would significantly enhance its media setting, and it would be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area. The applicant has requested that the proposal is considered in accordance with this paragraph of the framework. The inspector stated in 2022, which was the previous appeal on this site, that the near identical scheme to that under consideration did not meet all these tests. So the planning history is a material planning consideration. The timeline on this slide shows the most recent relevant planning history. In 2021, planning permission was sought and refused for a dwelling and scheme almost identical to that under consideration today. The previous application was appealed and dismissed. The inspector considered the proposal against paragraph 80 of the NPPF, which is now paragraph 84 of the 2023 version. Importantly, the inspector stated that there are 4 tests set out within paragraph 84E, and that in order for a scheme to be considered of exceptional quality, it needs to comply with all 4 tests. The inspector concluded that the proposal would not meet all 4 tests, and as such would not be a paragraph 84E development. The current application was submitted earlier this year, post the appeal decision. The proposal is for the construction of a large 2-storey house. It would be orientated east-west in the plot, and the design concept is based on the trees which are located on and around the site. The proposal includes a detached carport and bin store located close to the access. Again, the applicant has requested that this is considered against paragraph 84 of the framework. The plan on this slide shows how the site would be divided. The proposed dwelling would be sited within the southeast quadrant of the site, and the access would be taken from Mill Lane. The proposed carport and bin store would be close to the southern boundary, and a gate would be installed across the site access. The scheme proposes that the garden would be located to the east and south of the house, and the land to the north of the site would be less formal and would be seeded with wildflower grass, and an orchard would be planted alongside some other ecological enhancements. The drawings on this slide show the elevation which would front onto Mill Lane. The house would have a mostly flat roof design, which then kicks up at the northern end with a monopitch. The main changes between the 2 schemes are a small reduction in the building footprint, the use of vertically hung timber cladding at ground floor instead of stone, additional Inca gold colour added to the metal shingles used at first floor, a green roof, changes in the materials used for the superstructure of the building, provision using timber to reduce the carbon footprint, and there's additional ecological and biodiversity enhancements within the site, and there's minor fenestration changes to the building. The inspector, in the appeal decision, considered the 4 tests in paragraph 84E of the framework. These will need to be met for a scheme to be of exceptional quality. The inspector considered that the appeal decision only met 2 of these tests. The current scheme has also been assessed and considered against the 4 tests of paragraph 84E. It's been concluded that it only meets the same 2 of the 4 tests. In conclusion, the proposal is considered to not be materially different to that considered by the planning inspector on the site in 2022, which was dismissed at appeal. In the appeal decision, the inspector identified the 4 tests which the development would need to meet to be considered a paragraph 84E scheme, and the inspector concluded that the proposal only met 2 of these tests. The changes made to the scheme are minor and do not materially alter the scheme to a level which would result in the proposal being considered of exceptional quality. As the scheme does not meet the tests to be considered a paragraph 84E development, it is also considered in line with other national and local planning policies for houses in the countryside. These are detailed within the committee report. As it does not accord with any of the prescribed list of exceptions within policy DM8 of the local plan, it is concluded that the development would be harmful to the character and beauty of the countryside. The committee should also be aware that there has been no changes in national or local planning policy since the appeal decision. On the basis of all the above, refusal is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we have several people who wish to speak. Richard Booth. Sorry, the microphone's up there.
Hello? Okay. Right. Okay. Good evening, committee members. As an architect, I know a lot of hard work is required by all disciplines to achieve a functional and elegant design. In this case, it comprised of myself, the ecologist, landscape architect, and sustainable energy consultant. A public design survey last year resulted in 90% of 113 unknown respondents deciding the house was beautiful, inspiring, and stunning in its setting, reflecting the remarks and encouragement by friends and building professionals alike. NPPF paragraph 131 states, creation of high quality, beautiful and sustainable buildings and places is fundamental to what the planning and development process should achieve. We all have an opinion of what high quality architecture is, but many would agree it should be beautiful, inspiring and unique. The planning report assesses the design against paragraph 84E. It sees the tree-inspired concept as seeking to mimic and be organic in nature, limiting its response to the context of trees. Architecture takes inspiration from various sources, and in this case, the trees manifest as an abstract form to this energy-efficient design that considers the impact on the environment and the diverse vernacular of the area. The DAS, although not mentioned in the report, importantly refers to the design survey and the orchard. Orchards are considered important biodiversity by Natural England as they significantly encourage ecology. The combination of this house and the landscape will significantly enhance its immediate setting. The report accepts the design is very good and high standard, but it in places it appears to counter this view. Item 6.7 ends with, in order to raise the standard of design in rural areas, proposals must become an exemplar for outstanding and innovative rural architecture. The report, by accepting the appeal's conclusion, would raise the standard of design, appears to recognise the design is an example of outstanding architecture. 617 agrees with the inspector it would be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the local area, but oddly at 611 believes the design excludes the context of the wider local area. Ultimately, do committee members support the lion's share of public opinion and agree Leaf House is an 84E design? Thank you.
Thank you. Liana Booth. Can you get me the other? All of these, somehow.
Justice.
Bring the microphone, just pull it down a little, you should be all right then.
Can you? Yeah, thank you. Good evening. I would like to respectfully draw the committee's attention to paragraph 84 of the NPPF and reiterate that if a house meets the criteria of this paragraph, then the design is also deemed to be compliant with all other policies. The planning officer's report states that the design is an enhanced version of the one submitted by us 2 years ago. The design has been strengthened by the feedback and comments made by the appeal inspector and by the advice of the planning officer we met in June 23. It was important to us that the house exists harmoniously with the wildlife and the natural environment of the area, which we have lived within for more than 20 years. We're proud to present truly the best possible version of Leaf House. Key statements made by the appeal inspector include the design draws its main inspiration from the surrounding natural environment. Whilst contemporary in design, the proposal seeks to marry the dispersed residential character with the landscape by taking inspiration from trees. The sustainability features are truly commendable. The scheme would inspire many. The contemporary design of the proposed development would raise the standard of design in this rural area. Arguably, each of these positive comments imply that the scheme can be deemed as an outstanding design and therefore compliant to paragraph 84. The appeal, however, not upheld that the inspector was not convinced that the architectural or environmental qualities would be sufficient to significantly enhance the immediate setting. Crucially, the inspector acknowledged that determining whether a proposed design is exceptional quality is a matter of subjective judgment. To assess the design, we launched the independent public survey to obtain views on the visual impact of Leaf House. As Richard said, 182 out of 113 people agree the design suits its setting, it's beautiful, inspiring and stunning. We hope that the planning committee can see the beauty of the design of our dream home, how it will enhance the surroundings and vote in support of our application, especially as this subjective view has now been confirmed by the public vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Kearney.
Dear members of the committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present you this evening. If I may provide some brief background to assist the committee. I'm an architect and founding director of practice who has been fortunate to receive a number of regional and national awards from the Royal Institute of British Architects, the Architects' Journal and Civic Trust. I've sat on a number of design review panels, including co-chairing the regional panel for Inspire East. I've been a juror for RIBA awards and competitions, as well as providing design tuition advice for a number of organisations, including as Director and Chief Planning Officer of the Unitary Authority. I've reviewed and assessed architecture professionally and academically in planning submissions ranging from the poor to the very high quality. Exceptional and outstanding buildings only come to being through considered time and expertise during the development of the technical design, ensuring a strong vision is followed through to delivery. The key issue for the application before you relates to paragraph 84E of the NPPF, in particular with regards to outstanding and exceptional design. Throughout the UK, there are many paragraph 55, 79, 80 and 84 houses that have been approved, many of which are not responsive to their site, nor do they, in my opinion, represent outstanding architecture. I do believe that the proposal for Leaf House has the ability to be outstanding, to raise the quality and aspiration of the built environment within a rural setting. The inspector, during an appeal on a previous application, albeit slightly different, design concluded that the design was indeed of high quality and would raise the standard of design. My opinion is that exceptional design comes through the execution and skill of the architect to ensure very good at planning stage becomes outstanding once settled into the site. I've known the applicant for nearly 3 decades, professionally and personally. I can with confidence be sure that his creativity, intellectual understanding and ability, together with sheer tenacity and acute attention to detail, will deliver an outstanding contribution to rural architecture in response to paragraph 84E and a project the City of Chelmsford can be proud of. I hope the committee can support the applicant in their pursuit to deliver an outstanding home in a rural setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all too for keeping to time. That was beautiful. Right, does the officer want to come back on any of those points before we start? No? Okay. In that case, we'll go straight over to the committee. Who would like to start? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Am I correct in saying that the 4 tests are only applicable when it's considered to be an isolated property? So from that, I was trying to work out what the definition of isolated is. I appreciate you believe it's isolated and the previous inspector believed it was isolated. Looking at the surrounding area, I believe the nearest house is around 80 metres away. There is a rather large agricultural building, which I believe is about 40 metres away. And in the vicinity, there are various houses sort of quite scattered around. So the word isolated isn't one that comes to mind for me, but is there a definition? Thank you.
Unhelpfully not. With the previous scheme that went to appeal, one of our arguments was that it wasn't isolated. We were going for both. It wasn't exceptional quality and it wasn't isolated, but the inspector, through their consideration of the site, just was of a different opinion to the local planning authority. So against that appeal decision, it would be unfair and unreasonable of the local planning authority now to come up with a different view, especially there's been no change in, you know, policy or circumstances. So I hear what you say. We might agree with you, but the inspector didn't, and we are going with the inspector's opinion on that point.
Thank you. Councillor Pascone.
The key word seems to be outstanding, and I'm wondering in comparison to what, because it may be not outstanding in comparison with individual projects that are very, very specialised, but I think in comparison to the majority of architectural housing, I think it could be described as outstanding. So it's the context in which you use that word outstanding that seems to be a problem.
Can you turn off your microphone?
Yeah.
Councillor Hall.
I was going to add to that because it's kind of difficult. It seems to tick all the boxes for me, and I don't know how the inspector would define truly outstanding in this case, so I'm sort of failing on the guidance on that. And also significantly enhance the area. It would seem to be that this area was formerly derelict. They're creating something that looks very, very good and sympathetic with the environment, the ecosystems around it. In fact, even to go as far as improving it. So I'm really struggling on those points without guidance on where we don't see this as you know, as a enhancement in to the area, and also that this is a truly outstanding piece of architecture.
Councillor Papa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. I totally agree that for me the 4 points are ticked. That's how I see it. And I see when you say high standards, it's very subjective. And I can clearly, from the look and feel, I feel like it's something the residents have actually put the heart and mind, and I'm sure that how much I can feel what they're struggling in there for the last 3 years. So I think for me the 4 boxes are ticked. That's how I see it.
Councillor Pooley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've listened to that, to the presentation and to the committee's remarks.
Can you get a bit nearer the microphone?
Hang
I
on
know
one
it's
second.
difficult.
Let me try to avoid crashing. Lovely, thank you. Is that any better?
That's better.
Yes, I've listened with interest to the presentation and to the comments of the public gallery and all the owners of the property and the committee. And it's been mentioned a couple of times that the debate seems to be about the meaning of the words outstanding on the one hand and exceptional on the other, which is anybody's cup of tea, isn't it? I mean, I think that I have more sympathy with this than the officer's report does. I don't quite know whether there's a case for the policies here being slightly different as the revised local plan goes forward. But let's look at this as, let's take the officer's word for the fact that this is an exception to policy if we were to approve it, and we would have to find a reason why we found it an exception to policy. I think that's the normal process. For me, I think that it would have to be that I mean, everything is said to be a matter of judgment here. I'm not quite sure that there's anything which is put forward in the report which is an absolute and indisputable matter of planning fact in this context, and the planning arguments are a question of judgment. And so I think that our reason for treating this as an exception to what the officers describe as policy would be that we disagree with the judgment in the report and that we do find this design exceptional. I have two other comments, if I may. First of all, I think in the report I read that this has come to committee at the request of a local member, I guess, who want us to consider the architecture and none of the other reasons for refusal. Is that correct? Because that's really odd.
We'll ask the officer in a minute if you
Yep,
finish.
of course. And it's unfortunate that he's here. He's not here. The other thing which has alarmed me is that Great Leeds Parish Council seem to have no view on this at all. And I don't quite know whether anyone else has any sense of what their views might be, but it would help me in this sort of marginal case, marginal in some respects, to know what the local parish council thought. I'm taken with the answer, with the idea that local residents had a view, but of course we can't guarantee here how carefully that survey was carried out. I'm minded to approve this, but I'm torn by a number of things. Thanks.
Thank you. Who's next? Oh, come on. Councillor Dobson. We can't leave it there. We need to cover everybody.
Thank you, Chair. I sort of echo the sentiments of all the previous speakers, actually, and I am very curious as to actually what does exceptional look like, but I think that's probably a sort of a conversation to be had at another time. The way I'm reading the report is the fact that if you break it down simplistically, if a scheme has come back to an application, a new application for a scheme that has previously been refused or dismissed by an appeal by an appeal inspector. To me, I think it's very difficult to reconsider the fact that it could be acceptable. If there are no materially different changes to the current application that has already been dismissed in appeal, sadly, I'm minded not to support it, despite the fact I find it an incredibly interesting and with obviously the standards of the airtightness in the passive house and you know, obviously the carbon neutral sort of facilities it has. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I can support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sorpats.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to Councillor Pooley's question, I've heard from Councillor Raven. He tells me that the Great Leeds Parish Council is not against this proposal.
It's not here, though.
Sorry.
I mean, the information is not with us, so we have to treat that with
Oh, I see. Okay, yes. Oh,
understanding.
fair enough. Fair enough.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Um,
And he should be here.
yeah. Okay.
Ah.
Also, just wanted to really echo what Councillor Dobson's just said. I think I am sympathetic with this, but I think ultimately I can't see that there is material difference to the application that came previously in 2022. In the design, it looks more or less to be the same as was previously considered and rejected by the inspector. And I think, therefore, to an extent, our hands are tied in this case, as regrettable as that may be and as sympathetic as we may be. I'm really not sure that we can support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hyland, just about to you.
Thanks, Chair. Can we go back to the slide with the 4 points, please? Sorry, the ticks and crosses.
9.
So here the appeal and our current assessment is that it is not of a high standard of architecture. That's the assessment that the qualified officers have provided us. And it does not enhance the immediate setting, both by the appeal and the current scheme. So for me, I think the officers are right-minded on this occasion with the assessment of the 4 points in paragraph 84E of the National Policy Forum.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, on those sort of points again, one of the items is the immediate setting, and with the architecture's position in its setting, it means the really good biodiversity net gain and landscape architecture of the plot is in the section behind the trees, and the section most visible from the road is the building because of its orientation and position in the plot. And therefore it's harder to justify its enhancement of the immediate setting, whereas if it was in a different position, we could possibly reconsider that. The other point on architecture I do think is slightly, so the bit that's visible is the house, whereas the bit that's not visible is the biodiversity net gain, sort of orchards and ponds and that. So that makes it more difficult to say that it does enhance the setting in its current position and proposal compared to what other options could be. In regards to the architecture, it's really difficult to draw a line on what is exceptional architecture. I can see they've done lots of good work in choosing the materials and some of the design to make sure that it is unique and novel, and I'm sure it would be a lovely house that when most people presented that information would choose and would like to live in. So I'm not surprised by the public's interest in that house. But it's a very difficult judgment call. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frascone.
Hi, yeah. The 2 points were about the outstanding...
Can you go nearer your...
Sorry. The 2 points were about the outstanding architecture and the enhancing the look of the plot. And I feel that the survey that they've done speaks volumes in response to that, because although the inspector said that he didn't consider it outstanding or to enhance the area, clearly the majority of people who were answering the survey disagreed, and I think many people on the committee would disagree as well with that conclusion.
Thank you. Turn off, please. Thank you.
And just to one more point, that the inspector himself said that it was a subjective opinion.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak at this moment? Certainly an interesting debate. Are there any things you want to come back on at this point? Because I didn't let you come back earlier.
Only maybe just very briefly, I'm just very mindful, Councillor Frascona, the survey, we've not seen it, we don't know what questions were asked, we don't know who was asked, so I would be very mindful of what weight you might wish to give to that work that was carried out by the applicant. From our point of view, we cannot give it any weight because we simply don't know what it was. But just be mindful of that. You seem to be quite interested in the survey, that's all.
Can I just reply to that? I was interested, but on the other hand, I think the majority of the people on the members on the committee have that view as well. So I'm not surprised by that conclusion.
Right, does anyone else wish to speak? In that case, I will take it to a vote.
Which way around do you want to do that? As some would want to disagree.
Sorry, can you please put your microphone on?
Sorry, I was saying, which way around do you want to do that? Because normally if we disagree with the officer's opinion, we need to propose that as a motion in itself.
Yes, of course, my apologies.
So I will, I mean, I do think this deserves a vote. So I would like...
Apologies, yes, you're right, we need the reasons first.
Yes, so I do...
Thanks, Councillor Pooley. Can you give the reasons then?
Yes, I would like to propose that the proposal be accepted, the application be accepted, on the grounds that, while subjective, it does meet the 4 key grounds.
Councillor Papa.
Thank you very much, Committee and Chair again. And I think the proposal should be accepted based on the facts that the four boxes are ticked according to me. And also looking at the fact that it's their dream home, and I'm sure there are the 2 boxes that stands out are very, very subjective, and it could differ from one person to another person. So clearly this is something that as an individual, we're all born, we want to have our own house, something that we like and love to be in. And then we see lots of, I'm not sure if it's right or wrong to say here, big developers, builders getting through lots of approvals. So as an individual, somebody who's not impacting the land, the nature, just want to live in their dream home. From an emotional perspective, I also feel it's the right thing to do and support them.
Sorry, Councillor Pooley has given us a reason. Was it 1 reason or 2?
I think it's unreasonable to go through all of the possible reasons why we might accept it. Normally, if we go against the officer's opinion, it comes back to the following committee with the recommended reasons.
Can I just clarify then, Councillor Pooley, your proposal is that the officer's recommendation not be accepted and that it be deferred to a subsequent meeting to agree conditions in accordance with the normal procedure.
Thank you for that. Yes, it certainly should be deferred for the conditions, and I think it would be helpful if I proposed instead that we're minded to approve.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that it comes back.
Yeah. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Papa. Okay.
We've got a seconder.
Yes. Oh, good. We had Councillor Lee then. Thank you. All those in favour of going against the officer's recommendation, in other words, accepting it.
Sorry, can you just confuse me? Just against the officer? Yes.
All those against the officer's recommendation. All those in favour?
Yes, so that motion from Councillor Pooley is carried.
The proposal is carried, but that means this will come back to the next meeting for the decision on reasons that will be put forward. So this is not a complete decision tonight. It will come back with reasons that have to be agreed by the committee. Thank you very much. So that's the end of this part of the meeting. Thank you. Sorry. in front of it. This in the beginning. I thought it might have been me, but it seems to be okay now.
It's okay.
Oh dear. Not my day. Right, can everyone settle down again then, please? We move on to the next application, which is a set of 4. Start with land east of Ragged Robins, Lower Stock Road, West Hanningfield, Chelmsford, Essex. Can I have the officer's report, please?
Yes, of course, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So you'll see from the slide in front of you, we have got 4 planning applications on the same site. So we are presenting one PowerPoint presentation to you this evening for the 4 applications. In terms of decision making, members will be required to make a decision separately on each of items 7 through to 10. So in terms of where we are within the district, the circle is approximately showing the site midway between the villages of Stock and West Hanningfield. This is the field in question, outlined in blue. It's just over 4.5 hectares. And as I've already said, there are 4 separate planning applications before us this evening, each for an agricultural building, and each of those buildings is of the same dimensions. And I'll just run through them in terms of where they sit on the site. So the first application, item 7, is for a proposed hay barn, and this sits closest to Lower Stock Road. The next application, item 8, is for cow barn 1, and that sits next in line, further from the road. This next slide shows the proposed cow barn 2, which is item 9 on the agenda. And the last one shows cow barn 3, which is item 10 on the agenda. So you can see there they're running in a line at right angles to Lower Stock Road and parallel to the western site boundary. And in terms of what they look like, they're pretty standard agricultural buildings that you would expect to see on many farms. They are near identical in their size, or they're identical in their size at 25 metres by 30 metres footprint. They're just over 9 metres tall. The differences are that the cow barns have got gates across the frontage, whereas the hay barn is completely open on its frontage. Materials would be timber hit and miss vertical boarding and profile sheeting on the roof, for pretty standard stuff that you would expect in the countryside. These are required in connection with the applicant's large-scale farming enterprise that operates throughout Essex, which is a beef herd, and cattle would be on the site for between 6 and 8 months at a time. Main issues. So you will see from the report that the site lies within the Greenbelt. This is an agricultural proposal, and agricultural development in the Greenbelt is not inappropriate development. So there's nothing really more to say about the Greenbelt issues. The main issues that we have considered as part of the planning applications are on the screen there, and I'll run through each of those on the next few slides. So you will have read from your officer papers that there's a couple of non-designated heritage assets in the immediate vicinity. Those are shown in pink on the image in front of you. Lower Stock Road, for a length of 380 metres, is a protected lane, which is a non-designated heritage asset. And the site lies opposite, on the opposite side of the road, to a house called Belcoins, which is a non-designated heritage asset. So in terms of assessing the relationship between the development and those heritage assets, we've looked at the distances. So the distance between Belcoins and the hay barn is approximately 65 metres, and the distance between hay barn and the protected lane is about 53 metres. There is a substantial hedge along the south side of Lowestoft Road, and there are some gaps within that hedge closest to the existing access, and the proposal for the hay barn includes some additional planting to fill up those gaps within that hedge line. The narrow end of the barn is closest, and that limits the impact of the development on the setting of heritage assets, coupled with the distance that it's physically separated from them. Views of the barn from the lane would be most apparent from the access position where the access is open and there's some tree gapping at the moment. But as I've already mentioned, new planting is proposed to assist in filtering those views. In terms of the impact on heritage assets, the proposals would lead to a low level of harm to the protected lane, which is a moderate heritage significance, and a very low level of harm to a cottage of low heritage significance. So this harm, even though it's very low level, should be weighed in the planning balance, and we'll come on to that in a moment. We've looked at ecology because you can see there from the slide we have a public footpath that goes through part of the site in green, and that carries on south of the site, and that sits within a local wildlife site which is outlined in the dotted orange, Blythe Hedges Meadows. The applications were submitted before biodiversity net gain came into play, so we don't have to look at it from that point of view. But the application was also accompanied by ecology surveys, and an assessment of habitats was submitted because it is adjacent to or within a wildlife site. And no priority habitats were found to be present, but the report from the applicant did suggest some precautionary methods of construction throughout the barns when they're built, and some biodiversity enhancements to the site generally, back boxes, bird boxes, 2 beehives, etc., just to add to the biodiversity in the area. So there is no harm to habitats or ecology resulting from the development. Looking carefully at trees, because I've already mentioned the trees along the roadside boundary. There are mature trees along all the boundaries. You can pick that up from the images in front of you. And the barns are closest to the western boundary, indicated with the image of trees there. The council has served a provisional tree preservation order on a number of the mature trees all around the site. Tree information and surveys were submitted with the planning applications, and this includes tree protection details during construction. Cow barn number 1, which is solid shape in the line of 4, has the closest relationship to a mature tree. And if I can just home in on the detail of that, you can see there that the cow barn itself is about 30 metres away from the trunk of the closest mature tree, and just over 8 metres outside the root protection area in any event. No works are proposed to the trees as part of the planning application, and therefore our conclusion is that relationship with trees is acceptable. Next we come on to the access to the site, and the existing field access is opposite Belcoins. It's a gated entrance, and the gates measured from plan, or the space for the gates measured from plan, is just over 5.5 metres, and they're set back 8 metres from the carriageway. You can see there from the photograph there is a car parked on that access. I think it gives a sense of the size and scale of the access for vehicles using it. The applicant has provided some information to us about activity using that access. So daily movements, once the site is operational, will be 2 vehicles per day to check and feed and water the animals. And that would be via a small vehicle, as the feed is already on site in the barns. And the applicant has confirmed there'll be no need to bring on a specialist feed mixing machine, which I understand some residents have raised some concerns specifically about. Hay in the hay barn would be delivered in bulk once a year and then topped up as necessary. The applicant has advised us that they would use an appropriately sized vehicle to bring the hay to the site. Cows are brought on and off the site every few months. It's not a regular occurrence, and again, presumably vehicles used to transit the cows would be appropriately sized to get in and out of the access. Removal of waste from the site every 5 to 6 weeks. So in terms of the traffic generation resulting from the operation of the site for the agriculture, the access that is there is suitable both in terms of its geometry and its surfacing, and can deal with the level of traffic that will be generated by the use. In terms of neighbour amenity, and officers have looked very carefully at this, Belcoins, which is the closest property, outlined in pink, there's approximately 65 metres between buildings and buildings. Bellevue to the west, outlined in yellow, that's about 100 metres away to the boundary. The residential part of the property is a bit further away than that. The hay barn is exactly that, storing of hay, so that in itself would not generate any noise or any odour or any particular activity. We have carefully consulted with and questioned our colleagues in public health because of the concerns that have been raised by local residents about odour and noise disturbance that they could experience. And our colleagues in public health say there is no evidence to suggest that a well-managed site would cause undue disturbance. And bearing in mind this is a countryside location where agriculture is an activity that is perfectly acceptable and on its own doesn't require planning permission. So in terms of our conclusion, Chair, we have an agricultural development which is not inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, that is fact. We've not identified any ecology harm, we've not identified any harm to trees, the access as it is acceptable, and the relationship with residential properties is acceptable. We've identified that there is a low level of heritage harm to moderate and low level heritage assets. We're at the very bottom of the level of harm test in terms of heritage matters. But we have to put that into the planning balance because that's what we do. And on the other side of the scales, as you can see from the screen, we have an existing rural business in Essex, in Chelmsford, and this proposal is part of that business, supporting that local business and the rural economy. And we have from the applicant information that there would be, albeit very small, but less reliance on imported beef if we're home growing beef within Essex or within the UK. So, Chair, we've looked very carefully at these schemes and we have understood and heard the comments raised by local residents and do understand there is quite a lot of local concern. But in terms of the proposals, each of them, hay barn item 7 and then the cow barns on 8, 9 and 10, officer's recommendation is for each of those should be granted planning permission, and our recommendation is for approval.
Thank you. So I'll start with the cats. Right, we have quite a few people to speak, so please keep with time. It is 2 minutes deliberately so that you can all have the same amount of time to speak. Okay, first of all, it will be Lee Davis. Can you come and use the microphone, please?
Thank you. Thank you. The OR does not provide planning balance. Focusing almost exclusively on the benefits to the applicant, it seemed to gloss over many of the real concerns raised by various bodies as well as residents. There is little to no public benefit from this development. All of the key indicators impacts are decidedly and significantly in the negative column. Multiple health and safety risks, health and welfare risks pertaining to livestock as well as humans. Increased traffic, increased pollution, as well as being detrimental to the local environment. As stated in the application, there is no additional employment resulting from the development, nor is there any evidence or indeed consideration of any benefit to the local economy. The applications, neither individually nor collectively, demonstrate agricultural need for the development of a significant intensive farming operation in which vastly more cattle will be located on the site than the grazing land could sustain. This intensive farming application, located on a disparate parcel of land in a difficult-to-access, narrow, meandering lane, requires an acre to be concreted over for the hard standing and the access roadway amounting to more than 10% of the grazing land. It seeks to demonstrate agricultural need by referencing the reduction of carbon emissions through reducing beef imports from Australia. This is misleading. For example, in January 24, of 23,900 tonnes of imported beef, just 214 tonnes came from Australia, the source being ADHB Beef Market Update, Friday the 22nd of March 24. However, reducing carbon footprint is important, and consideration should be given for a more immediate means of reducing carbon emissions by instead increasing the barn capacity at one of the applicant's existing extensive estates to derive agricultural efficiencies and thereby eradicate the additional diesel carbon emissions generated by the inevitable farm traffic travelling to and from the Lowestoft Road site on a daily, weekly and monthly basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart Dungeon.
Good evening. My name is John Dunton. I'm speaking on behalf of Stuart, who can't attend tonight. Is that okay?
Yep,
okay.
That's fine, thank you.
We're interested to see that the site is 4 adjacent sites, and we think that there is a legal precedent, planning precedent, which states that 4 sites close together have to satisfy 4 criteria to be considered separately. The 4 criteria are common ownership, simultaneous determination date of the application, functional independence of the 4 sites, and standalone projects. Now, we think that these 4 sites should be considered as one, not 4 individual, and therefore the ecological and biodiversity assessment should be carried out on a large site basis and not a small site basis. So that's a main consideration, we feel. The submitted ecological assessment did not take into account that the site has been a meadow for as long as I can remember. So just prior to it being assessed, the site was ploughed and the assessment based on the ploughed site. Now, one of Chelmsford's consultees, which is Essex Wildlife, they said that under government guidance, the assessment should be carried out to the pre-status of the site prior to it being ploughed. Obviously, this isn't the case, so we think that the ecological assessment is flawed on that basis. The planning officer's report states that the highways had no issues with the entrance to the site. They, in fact, have asked for a much wider entrance, over 6 metres, with a concrete hard standing to be provided. So this has an effect of impacting upon the protective lane status by forming a new gateway and a new concrete hard standing. In summing up, I would respectfully ask the committee, you are our final line of defence against this proposal.
Thank you.
To consider.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Mark Wilkes.
I uploaded some schematics to your portal. Has everyone seen those schematics? Because if not, I have some hard copies here. Sue, could you just pass them down? Just.
I don't understand. Sorry, what's this?
They're CAD drawings that I uploaded on the portal.
We have all the information we need. Yes, we have those photos.
Oh, you've got the CAD drawing?
We've seen those photos.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you. Right.
Okay, if you address the microphone.
These CAD drawings, which we've done.
We have seen the photos, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Good evening. My name is Mark Wilkes. I live opposite the field where the proposed barns will be built with my wife Sue. Sue has legal representation and you will have received objections from her solicitor, Richard Buxton. I would like to bring your attention to two things regarding these 4 applications. The position of the barns is very close to our property visually and in terms of odour and noise. In the current application, under recommendation from Michael Hurst, the barn location was moved 90 degrees in direct line of sight of our house. The location of the barns is purely based on a requirement to satisfy Heritage Protected Lane policy, but fails to consider the impact to local residents. 100% the proposed application needs to be sensitive to existing housing. This is quite fundamental. Essex County Council Highways stated that the proposal is acceptable subject to conditions and in essence to increase the size of the gated access. The planning officer has stated that these conditions are not required. The drawings that I had produced, the CAD drawings, based on the current field access, dimensions and the vehicle used at the applicant's small game facility, shows the space required for the vehicles to perform the manoeuvre to enter the field. And if you have looked at them, you can see on the current entrance dimensions, this is impossible to do. It's not 5.5 metres, the gate is 4.5 metres. So, in summary, if you're minded not to refuse these applications for this industrial farm facility, then the applicant should be invited to reposition the barns in a less intrusive position in harmony with local residents. The highways recommendation must be followed to ensure unimpeded access to the field and road safety to the many users of Lowestoft Road.
Right, thank you. I gave you a little longer because of that problem at the beginning. Right, move on. Anthony Del Pizza.
Hello, Anthony Del Pizzo from Lowestoft Road, resident. May I ask, please, councillors, are you fully aware of the historical attributes of Lowestoft Road? It's not for me to judge the consequences and impact that the application will have on our protected lane. However, it's really important that the councillors are fully clear about the size of the overall operation that will be in place if the 4 applications are approved. We're not just talking here about a few young cows grazing on our field. We're talking about 250, up to 250 cows situated across 4 industrial-sized warehouse-type structures, spanning the size of a football stadium. I do feel that as the applications that has been split into 4 separate applications, the applicant is trying to play down the overall size of the operation. This undoubtedly will be a full-scale factory farm situated in just 10 acres of land. It's really a small site. And it will not be limited to just a couple of visits a day. There'll be lots of coming and going of large tractors and trailers already experienced by the people living close to the applicant's other operation and small gains in stock. The application supporting statement indicates that there will be a low number of vehicle movements, mainly with small vehicles, and I would dispute this as I've personally witnessed Kingdom Merch Fibre 400 feeder wagon used by the applicant at his other ventures, measuring 3.4 metres high, 3 metres wide and 7.6 metres long. That's without the tractor at the front that pulls it. In total, this piece of kit will span at least 12 metres, going down a very small protected lane. This is most definitely not a small vehicle, and it's only today that it's been highlighted that apparently the applicant won't need to use this vehicle. I would ask the councillors please to take on board the strength of the objections of the local community. We really do need your help here. The applicant is not...
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, that's your 2 minutes up. Thank you. Paul Hope.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Chair. My wife and I live adjacent to the proposed land for the erection of the cow sheds and barns. The barns have now been moved 90 degrees, which is even closer to our home and garden space. My wife suffers from a lung condition, pulmonary fibrosis, caused by bronchitis and is an autoimmune disorder called Sjogren's syndrome. She is under Papworth Hospital for the lungs in Cambridge and Brewfield Hospital in Chelmsford. She is on a trial medication for her condition. We are very concerned about the close proximity of these proposed barns, not only because of the smell, but from the pesticides and chemicals used that will be airborne. This can be exacerbated to my wife's conditions with immediate effect and potentially be life-threatening. This is our main concern. I would like to ask the committee to please consider the impact this will have on human health, notably my wife's, by approving this proposed dwelling planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on, Elizabeth Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In view of the limited time, I'm going to limit myself to really just one point about heritage assets. But first of all, the issue about capacity, context has already been made, and I really would reinforce that. This isn't about a few cows wandering around in a field. And put simply, why build such large sheds for such a small area of land? But on heritage assets, the committee must be aware of the planning history of the site and that 4 previous applications were recently refused. One of the grounds for the refusal was that the proposed buildings would be harmful to the setting of the heritage assets, and the level of harm would not have been outweighed by the public benefits of the development. The downgrading of the level of harm is, of course, a subjective judgment, but inconsistent with the previous assessment and flawed for the following reasons. The buildings will remain highly visible from the lane and Belcoins, and the revised siting brings the building closer to them. Turning the buildings as proposed will expose the hard-standing yard and track, plus the buildings, to the lane and Belcoins at the most open aspect of the site, and the proposed tree planting will not adequately mitigate. The resiting does not reduce the harm. If anything, it increases the impact on the heritage assets. There's no mention in the officer's report of the permanent damage and harm that will be caused to the fabric of the lane, including historic verges, by heavy vehicles during construction and thereafter. And in addition, the officer's report does not deal with the concerns raised about vehicle type and trip rate, and consequently the impact of further damage on the character and significance of the lane. The officer's assessment of harm fails to take account of the damage and harm to the protected lane necessitated by the improvements required, not just recommended as stated by the local highways authority to the access for highway safety concerns. The Conservation Officer themselves and also the ECC Historic Environment Branch have both noted in relation to the refused applications that, quote, harm can be caused to the protected lanes through creation or widening of access points and removal of elements of the lane or similar direct impacts.
Thank you
I
very
urge
much.
the
We have
committee
all
to
that
reject.
info as well. Thank you. I'll move on now to Carl Swift. No? Not here, okay. I'll move on to Chris Ragg then.
Good evening. We would like to thank the planners for the professional approach to this application. The site is within Mr Sharp's agricultural holding. Mr Sharp and his family have invested in and maintained farmland for many years. The primary activity involves the management of suckler beef cows. Mr Sharp holds farm assured and red tractor assurance certificates, ensuring regular audits to maintain high health standards for his cattle. As the owner of the field, Mr Sharp is entitled to farm his land effectively. He can stock the field with cattle in accordance with government guidelines or without the need for planning consent. This application follows on from a previous proposal based on the advice of the Council's Heritage Officer. We've amended the scheme to relocate the barns away from the protected lane. Mr Hurst has raised no objections to this. We note alternative locations to the barns were considered but deemed most appropriate by Mr Hurst where they are. We understand that some committee members have been approached by locals to voice concern. Councillor Dobson approached us on behalf of Mr Wilkes to meet the applicant on site. which our client agreed to. Unfortunately, Mr Wilkes cancelled the meeting. His alternative date fell outside of the application timeframe, so the meeting couldn't go ahead. To address other concerns, the site access is suitable for smaller farm vehicles or utility vehicles which will be used. Small feeder tractors will be stored on site. Vehicle movement will be limited to utility vehicles or a car twice daily for feeding and once/twice annually for the stocking up of hay and silage. Every 6 weeks, the barns will have to be mucked out, carted away via a small tractor and trailer and sold to local farms. No slurry will be produced. Cattle will be bedded on straw and manure will be sold locally. We note that the council have recently applied a TPO to some of the trees on the boundaries. This falls in line with Mr Sharp's commitment to preserving and enhancing hedgerows. We thank you for listening.
Thank you. Right, now we have Councillor Brown from the West Hanningfield Parish Council. Please.
Good evening. My name is Councillor Paul Brand and I'm here on behalf of the Parish Council of West Hanningfield. Parish councils, as we know, are dogs without a bite, but tonight we hope to have a little bark. West Hanningfield is a small, close-knit village community, and here we have 4 more applications trying to disturb the beauty and tranquillity of our parish. These applications, somewhat strangely supported by planners and heritage officers, will potentially decimate a protected and beautiful lane. A lane that's well used by horse riders, dog walkers, cyclists and ramblers, and these groups would face an impact on their safety as this lane is not suitable at all for any further increases in traffic. As a business proposal, the applications are questionable at best, and this raises the spectre of this being merely a vehicle to possible future planning permissions, more aligned to profit than farming. Let me be very clear with you all. This is not a farmyard scene of cows wandering around in a field. These animals will be tethered, kept indoors as feeding beasts. This is an enterprise that should surely be better placed as part of a large, intensive and commercial farming establishment, and indeed this is where they are often located, not in a tiny lane on a small parcel of land amongst residential homes. Just because the officers consider the application to be somehow suitable doesn't mean you're unable to use your vote in a more valuable and individual fashion. A very similar application in another comparable lane on an exact same parcel of land size in West Hanningfield to convert Greenbelt to a farming use was refused by your planning officers on the following grounds, and I can quote from, I won't do them all, there's too many, but they basically said it would be detrimental to the amenities of the area, particularly by reason of the noise and disturbance created by the vehicular traffic. The road hierarchy serving the site is not suitable for the type and frequency of traffic that the proposed use would be likely to generate. The traffic movements generated would have a detrimental effect on local amenities. They went on to say the use would generate traffic movements which would create nuisance and cause danger to other users of the rural road networks. The use would not conserve or enhance the appearance of the countryside, and they quite rightly refused that one. West Hanningfield Parish Council would wish to see consistency in planning decisions, and so request that the same rules and considerations are given to these applications in front of you. Councillors, these applications are not in your backyards, and they're not opposite your homes. They're not even in your villages, but you have an elected responsibility to protect our whole area. Retain our greenbelt, and your wisdom may help us retain the beauty of the quiet lanes that we all so enjoy. This commercial enterprise is simply not suitable at this location, exactly as stated previously in the previous application by your officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dobson.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to address this committee. There have already been several points raised by residents and the Parish Council, so I intend to deal with just 4 of the important aspects. Firstly, the highways issues and the suitability of the protected lane. Residents are concerned with the state of the road, bearing in mind the issues caused by similar operations by the applicant at Stock, where verges are being eroded and ruined. The Heritage Officer's response is concerned with the potential damage to the protected lane and its historic integrity. The same officer has not responded as yet to the subsequent high-raise requirement for the new access to the site, since they were received after his comments were posted. For example, the gateway is required to be significantly widened with a hard surface, a turning circle and the construction of a highway verge crossing. This erodes the character of the protected lane at this point. Finally, no transport statement has been submitted with the application, just a couple of lines in the covering letter stating that there will be minimal traffic movements daily. This should be addressed as the highways picture is incomplete. Biodiversity. One of the reasons for refusal of the first suite of applications was that no environmental report was submitted. These applications have such a report, but crucially the report was drawn up immediately after the land in question had been ploughed, thereby removing any trace of habitats or protected species. Essex Wildlife Trust have objected and have requested that any biodiversity net gain is calculated prior to the clearance and ploughing of the site. This issue is not addressed in the officer report. Surface water. The application buildings are proposed to be situated in close proximity to Sandon Brook, and there is potential for surface water and waste from these proposed barns to run off into Sandon Brook. There is no statement in the application which addresses this potential issue. Bearing in mind the 4 linked applications, if considered cumulatively, which they should be, introduces a significant amount of hard standing when barn floors and surround hard standing is taken into consideration. Whilst the Public Health Protection Services were not commented, details of such mitigation should be detailed in the application. Finally, heritage. The impact of the proposals on the property opposite the site is significant. The applications introduce 4 large barns in close proximity to this property and will be clearly visible from both the property and users of the protected lane. And whilst the original refused applications caused more harm to the lane, hence their refusal, these new applications will cause harm to the residents in Belcoins and as acknowledged by the Heritage Officer, will still cause harm to the protected lane. In summary, these applications will cause significant harm to the protected lane, both from a visual and potential for damage by farm vehicles which will visit the site daily, including the periodic use of large vehicles when moving cattle and clearing out the barns, and to the setting of Belcoins as a non-designated heritage asset. I urge members to consider carefully the impact that these applications will have on the protected lane and the local residents who will be directly affected. Whilst the image of the rural idyll with cattle gently lowing in rolling green fields may well come to mind, remember that these barns are required for farming on an almost industrial scale and will have a significant detrimental impact on residents for many years to come. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, before we go to the committee, I'd like the officers to come back, please. And after that, presumably, Councillor Dobson, you will leave while we speak. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. A number of the speakers and councillors talked about the traffic and the increased traffic and the impact that that potentially would have on the...
speak up, please.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Bring it a bit nearer. Oh,
I can't.
Sorry, some of the microphones are new. Well, they're all new, but some of them are fixed. That makes it difficult.
I'll lean in. A number of the comments that residents and ward councillors have made relate to the increased traffic and the impact that that potentially would have on the protected lane and other users of the highway. It's a highway. It's used by all sorts of traffic anyway. The refuse lorry.
Please listen.
The refuse lorry, I believe it's a full-size refuse lorry, uses it. Any large vehicle going about its daily business is entitled to use the highway. We can only tell you what information we have, and the applicant has told us what he believes the daily traffic use will be, and that, in addition to the traffic that use that road on a daily basis, is not going to make a material impact. We've been to the site, my colleagues have been to the site numerous times. You meet traffic. That's what you do on rural roads. We met some very large traffic on these rural roads going about their daily business. the proposal with the level of traffic that we are told it will generate isn't going to make much of a difference to that. We've heard about the access itself and the Highway Authority suggesting that it is made up to, you know, supermarket access standards, if I can be flippant. This is not what the site needs for the level of traffic that it will generate. It's already an access that's at right angles to the road. It's already a hardened access. The use of the materials on the access are typical and common on any rural farm. We wouldn't expect and we wouldn't want a sea of concrete coming in off the road to serve this site based on the information that we have been told. And you can see there from the images, there's a car parked in the access. We've been past that site where there's been 2 builders' vans parked in that car, in that access, quite comfortably. It's a suitable access for the use that is proposed. And we have challenged our colleagues at Essex County Council, and they will always ask for the best that they can possibly achieve on any site access, but our view is it's simply not necessary, and it's not what we would want in this rural street scene in any event. We've heard about the concern that this will be an industrial process, numerous cows kept within barns, etc. It's a farming business. It's a commercial use. You will have seen as you've been driving around Chelmsford or even on the train in Chelmsford, fields with many cows within them, especially if you're on the train to London. They would be part of the herd that the applicant owns, and they free roam this time of year from what we have observed, and then presumably in the winter they will be kept more inside when the ground is sticky. In terms of the heritage assets, listed building and protected lane, we have obviously liaised with our colleague, our expert on these matters. And as I said in the presentation, we are dealing with heritage assets that are at the low end of the heritage spectrum. We have got a protected lane, which is a non-designated asset of moderate weight, and we have got a low designated residential property. And our view is that the impact is very, very low level in terms of the planning balance. We've heard from the parish council. They've referred to a similar application in West Hanningfield that was refused. We unfortunately don't know which application they are referring to, so we haven't been able to research that and bring that to you this evening. Councillor Dobson went through 4 very important points, which I think I've covered in terms of highway issues. Biodiversity, we did receive a comment from Essex Wildlife Trust. I believe they were incorrect in their assessment that this site required biodiversity net gain. It didn't. None of these applications came in after the date that BNG was triggered. Yes, the field was ploughed, but a farmer can plough his fields whenever he wishes to. You know, that is something we have no control over as a local planning authority. Surface water, I believe, was raised. My understanding from the applications of each of the barns, the surface water from the roofs would be captured in underground tanks, and that water would then be filtered back to provide drinking water for the animals. So in terms of trying to capture the runoff and use it actively, that's the model that we are being presented with this evening. And the question of whether the application should be considered cumulatively or independently. Obviously, we've had to look at them independently and give you independent recommendations, but our assessment, the assessment by the Highway Authority, the assessment by our colleagues in Public Health, the assessment by our colleagues in Heritage, our assessment, we're looking at it as a whole package, and the activity that the whole development would generate. That's how we have assessed these applications for you this evening. Chairman, have I missed anything else that you picked up on?
No.
No?
Thank you. Thank you. Then once Councillor Dobson leaves, I'll open it to the committee. And this is a normal part of the process. Right, committee, who would like to start? Please, everybody be quiet so that you can hear all the arguments. I know you only mumble, but it does make a difference for us. Right, who would like to start? Councillor Papa?
Thank you again, Chair. I think we should be supporting local businesses. But saying that, you can see those residents out there. So this is a great plot if there was no residents out there. So I make my decision based on this. So if there's no residents, it's a great place to be in because there's no hazard or health factors involved in it. If there is residents, there should be no business out there because it's about their health, it's about the kids, and so I would say we should reject this proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I did have 7 points, but whittled it down to 4 with your previous comments. Could you explain what makes Lowestoft Road protected? I'm certainly not saying it shouldn't be, but just what qualifies it to be a protected road? Second point, on the previous application on this site that was refused, could you clarify what position the barns were in? I believe they were parallel to Stock Road, but if you could confirm that. Further points, legally, would this be considered any differently if this were to be one single application for the 4 barns? And final point, if we were minded to approve this, I don't think it would need to be a condition, but could it be a condition that trees are planted between the hay barn and Lowestoft Road to hide it somewhat? But I appreciate it's already on the application. I believe that's all of them. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll let you go back straight to that.
Going in reverse order. The trees to be planted, the hay barn particularly has trees proposed closest to the access. There is a bit of a gap there on one site. That's where the obvious gap is in the hedgerow, and we would welcome some extra planting there to filter views. The rest of the tree line along Lowestoft Road is pretty fine actually. It's a really robust hedge and pretty mature. Legally, your question about how it would be considered as one separate application, under one separate application it would trigger a major application, and that triggers other things in terms of submissions with planning applications, particularly sustainable urban drainage. But it isn't. It's not. We can't consider it like that. It's come in as 4 separate planning applications. Any applicant is entitled to make an application submission how they wish. And we as a local planning authority have to deal with that application or applications as submitted, not in a different way. In terms of the position of the barns on the refused application, have we got my glasses on? There we go. They ran along the top. Going on site, it was quite obvious and quite quickly obvious that they would be, all you would see when you were physically on the lane would be the backs of those barns. I think the first time we went on site was middle of winter, which obviously is most exposed. That was just the wrong place to put any buildings on that site. So we were quick to take a view on that. In terms of the what makes something a protected lane, the protected lane designation is something that comes from Essex County Council. Is a programme intended, can I just read this screen, sorry, intended to preserve public routeways that maintain much of the historic character and features and maintain their ecological and historical association. So it's work that's done by Essex County Council, and we then as a local planning authority will take on board their suggestions, presumably for protected lanes, and then we identify them within our Chelmsford local plan. So there are a number of protected lanes within Chelmsford, but I suppose they tend to be, you know, rural lanes that have been there a very long time, you know, hundreds of years probably as routes, and probably have, you know, not changed hugely, you know, over, you know, the last, you know, few years anyway. So that's where that designation actually generates itself from.
Okay, who else would like to speak? Councillor Tron.
Thank you, Chair. I was also going to ask about the significance of the application being split into 4 separate applications versus a whole application on the basis that it's a single site. So I'd like to be really clear on this point, please. The applicant has the ability to apply in 4 separate applications or as a single application, and when the application is put forward to the planning authority, there is no option for the planning authority to consider whether the way the application has been made could be made in, I'm trying to watch my words here, but in perhaps a more appropriate way.
The applicant could put in a planning application for one building, one barn, and secure a planning permission for that, and build that, and then the following week put in a second planning application for the next barn. It could be done that way. It could be done in the way that it has been done, as 4 separate applications, or it could be done as one whole planning application. But it's been done as it's been done, and we have to deal with it as 4 separate applications. It doesn't trigger. The only thing I think it triggers is in terms of it came in as one planning application. The floor area of all the buildings would have triggered a sustainable urban drainage submission, which is a technical thing that tells us how you're going to deal with the surface water, and we know how they're going to deal with it because they've told us, because they're going to take it off the roof, they're going to filter it down into storage tanks underground and push it back to feed the cows. There's nothing else, I believe, that would have needed to have been submitted had it come in as a one planning application.
Okay, do you want to come back, Councillor Tron?
And can I ask, is that a Chelmsford planning policy, or it's national planning policy or regulations that allow the applicant to present it in that way, and effectively the planning authority does not have the ability to suggest it could be presented in a different way or take it into account in a different way, i.e. you put in 4 separate applications for a single site and there is not the ability for the planning authority to consider it as a single site. I appreciate your point about what the additional considerations might be, but that aside, there is not that ability for the planning authority to do that, and that's national planning, regulation, law, policy, whatever the correct terminology is, please.
We have to follow national guidance, we have to follow legislation, but we simply have no control how any applicant wishes to present their planning application, how big their site might be, what the building is that they wish to propose. That is obviously down to the applicant. We will always have half an eye on, you know, what if, and we are very mindful of that, but when it comes to making a decision and a recommendation, we have to make it on the basis that they are 4 separate planning applications, and they don't trigger the things that a combined planning application would trigger in terms of SUDs.
Thank you. Councillor Highland.
Thank you, Chair. My concern that's been raised by the residents was the traffic, the highway movements. I didn't see too much detail in the highway movements. Did we have an indication of the current traffic levels and what level of increase will that bring?
Can I see if anyone else wants to speak, and then maybe we can go back with several points. So one is traffic. Okay, Councillor Thorpe-Apps.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm finding this quite a difficult one. I think there's a balance here, isn't there, between protecting our rural greenbelt landscapes and supporting rural business and UK agriculture more generally. Government policy is unfortunately often quite unhelpful to our farming community, and I think it's important that as a committee we do consider striking the right balance. I think we should remember that many of the rural landscapes that we enjoy today exist only because of sustainable rural businesses working the land and conserving that land. But that being said, it is clear to me that the proposed barns would in this case cause significant harm to local residents, and I think that harm is cumulative. The 4 large barns combined would cover a large area, and that doesn't appear to be in keeping with the local area. It's been said already that the proposed type of cattle farming here would be almost industrial in scale, and again, I'm not sure how appropriate that would be in this location, and indeed whether the impact on traffic flows has really been fully considered here. So yeah, it's a difficult one to consider, I think, but there's clearly a lot of harm. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson. We will come back, Councillor Hine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd really like to follow on from both of those points, but from a slightly different angle. I mean, farming, as has been said tonight, is an industry. And when you live in the countryside, you are in fact living in an industrial area. I live on a protected lane, so you have my every sympathy. And it's also on the national cycle route. So I do get the matters about conflicts on the highway between very large traffic, large vehicles and very small vehicles, namely bicycles. The question I really want to put to officers is, where I am, it's a very arable area, and therefore that heavy traffic is seasonal, and so throughout harvest we're constantly having very heavy grain lorries, tractors, combine harvesters hurtling up and down the road. But in winter months, there's virtually nothing. And I think just want to address that seasonality and that traffic flow question. Cattle farming, I would have thought, would have a fairly consistent, regular, but maybe not frequent level of traffic. I just wondered if the County Council had actually considered that.
Thank you. Shall I wait a bit longer, or do you want to come back with those?
Up to you.
Okay, well, there's one more then, I think. Councillor Armstrong? I'll go back to the officer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of technical ones. Sorry, one is on one of the drawings it says brick facing or natural. I'm assuming the natural means the exposed concrete. Is there an ability to specify the condition that it is the brick facing due to the sensitivity of the heritage area and it being a more natural material within that setting? One of the others was indication. Has any indication of welfare been provided on site for those who would be operating the site in regards to if they are working there a full day doing farm animals within what's there? The other thing was the water capture. At the moment I can see only one underground tank that seems inconveniently placed right adjacent to the root protection zone, which would require an excavation immediately adjacent to the root protection zone. And it's also quite small just from an initial view, and if the basis was that this was to capture all the roof drainage, has there been any evidence that that would be adequate and that there wouldn't be any water spill off onto the field or into the brook? And then just separately on water, the roof water seems accounted for, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence of the grey water, so any water that falls immediately to the sort of yards to the side or happens to get into the stables or come out of the stables, whatever liquids those may be, and any mitigations of those into the adjacent field and then down into Sandon Brook. Do we have any info on that? Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've got quite a bit to come on there.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the traffic levels, again, I can only reiterate what I have been, or what we have been, the information we have been given about the levels of daily traffic serving the site twice a day to tend and feed the animals. In addition to that, other traffic will come to take away manure, will come to top up feed, and bring the animals and take the animals off. From my understanding, from the information we've been given, this is not a highly trafficked site that is likely to occur. In terms of Councillor Wilson's question about arable farming is seasonal, etc., is this presumably cattle farming is all year round. I don't believe it's seasonal. The cows are kept, they're fattened, they're taken away when they've fattened up enough. How long that takes, whether that's 6 months, 8 months, I suppose it depends on lots of factors. But my understanding is that it's not seasonal in the same way that arable farming is seasonal in terms of traffic generation. My understanding is that the traffic would be that level of traffic throughout the year. Councillor Armstrong, condition about some materials. Condition 3, I believe, looks for us to agree materials that are appropriate for rural context. In terms of indication of welfare for workers on the site, my understanding is that workers aren't there for hours at a time. They are visiting the site to feed, water, check, as they do with other satellites and sites that the applicant owns, and his main hub at Frissling Hall. So no, there are no proposed welfare facilities for workers. All of the applications, all of the barns include a underground water tank. The one we're focused on particularly is for Cow Barn 1, simply because it's a bit closer to the trees than the others. Is it adequate? Is it going to capture all the water? I don't have that information. It would be foolhardy, I suspect, to put in a tank that didn't meet your requirements. In terms of water into the field, well, the water is in the field anyway. I mean, it already rains and it already soaks into the ground and it already does what water does. That's really not going to change that much as part of the planning application. We have conditions for details of the surface tracks. We would be looking for permeable materials, as you would expect with most farming areas. As I said earlier, we're not looking for seas of concrete across fields to serve these buildings, because from our understanding the traffic generation is so light it wouldn't require that level of construction.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Concern really with the one of the residents made a comment around the health of his wife, and have we made any provisions for that in terms of investigating emissions and various other things that presumably will increase from vehicles and processes on the farm that could affect the resident in an adverse manner?
I have a feeling that we can't cover that point, but would you say so? It's not really in our remit.
It's a very difficult question, Chair. Obviously, we've got a close by resident who's clearly very poorly, and that her husband is very keen to make sure that nothing takes place in the neighbourhood that would make her health condition any worse. I would say that's very much a private interest, though. Again, all I can say is that we haven't got any evidence that a well-managed livestock will cause any undue harm or disturbance. As I said, we received comments from public health. We went back to our colleagues in public health once we'd started receiving comments from local residents to question them and quiz them to say, please reconsider in the light of comments that residents are making. They're very concerned. And our colleagues in public health reconsidered, and they came back to us again saying they have no undue concern. So I can only report to you that the experts are content that it won't be harmful in terms of ordinary health matters.
Thank you. Councillor Popper.
I just want to ask a couple of questions and then read a few things. Do we know how many homes and what's the total population in that area?
How big an area are you after, Councillor?
So that's probably within the 400 metres mark.
I haven't counted, sorry, Councillor Popper.
I'm just trying to understand the impact of
Less
this.
than 20, I'd guess?
How many?
Is this
Maybe between 10 and 20, I
Can
would
residents
say, in
help
that
me with
ribbon.
it?
I'm not quite sure what.
That's fine. Okay, let me just move on to the other bit. So I just wanted to talk about this impacts of these farmings. One of the first thing is odor and air quality. The significant amount of manure which emits an unpleasant odor and contribute to air pollution. The second thing I want to talk about is water pollution running off from cattle farms and contaminate the local water supplies. The third thing is the noise, which we already talked about, which is these operations can be noisy due to animals, machineries, and transport activities. We talked about health risk. Health is wealth, right? So there's something called this is something which I just found out. There's a potential for zoonotic diseases. Diseases that can be transmitted from animals to humans, such as E. coli, Salmonella, and Cryptosporidium, which can pose health risks to residents, particularly in biosecurity measures are inadequate. Pests and insects.
Councillor Papa, we do have evidence from.
So would you be able to provide me the evidence that this will not happen? Or this is not there? The other way around?
Chair, through you, I can only repeat to you which our expert colleagues in public health team have said in their assessment of the application, which they are experienced of dealing with farming locations, that they have said that a well-run and managed site, and they have no reason to believe that this wouldn't be a well-run and managed site, should give no reason for undue disturbance. I cannot speak with you of particular diseases, I'm afraid.
No, I'm just saying some of the concerns and there's a few more I just want to highlight is the pests and insects, the property value when you're in a farm will goes reduces. So there's quite a few things to be considered. So yeah, just wanted to highlight these things if it's been looked into. I'm sure the experts have looked into it, but it'll be good to know some of these points I've raised.
We have had the experts, so did you want to say anything, Councillor?
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to make the point, which the committee I'm sure have heard many times before, that there is other legislation that controls these sorts of developments. There's other legislation in relation to pollution. There's other legislation in relation to, I'm sure, the way the animal husbandry and all sorts. There is other legislation that the business will have to comply with that is separate from planning legislation. We can only deal with planning legislation and planning policies.
Thank you. Councillor Pooley.
Thank you again, Chair. I think that I want to make one relatively small point and then one slightly different point. First of all, we haven't talked much about the footpath. We've talked about the protected lane. Maybe I missed it, or maybe I can't see, but is it an enclosed footpath? Has it got very thick hedges on either side? Because I wouldn't want to be walking down there and see that number of cattle in that space at any time of year, whatever else was going on.
It is on the slide that we've got up now, I think.
Well, that's why I apologise for not being able to see clearly, but that's what's that, a hedge either side of the dotted line?
It's there's a hedge either side of the dotted line, and at the moment, from our last site visit, you can scramble between the hedges and the trees onto the main part of the field. It would be presumably for the applicant to make his site secure for his animals, and he may or may not choose to keep footpath users and cattle separate. Having walked other public footpaths that are within the applicant's ownership with cattle in the field, the applicant's choice was to use estate railings to keep cattle and public footpath users separate on that site in Margaretting. Whether he chooses to do that here, that would be for him. But it's not unusual to have a footpath going through the middle of a field used by animals.
It was a factual question rather than a debate, so thank you for that. But it was interesting that in your reply you said, having visited other sites that the applicant keeps cows in other parts of the county and presumably nearby if it's a Chelmsford person. I would be hugely reassured by a site visit that enabled us to see the quality of operation that he has in different places with differing numbers of cows. Because make no mistake, everybody, this is a large application on a small site. And I would be very interested to see how he deals with similar fields in other parts of the county, because I fear that this is not just almost industrial, but potentially industrial. My final point I want to make is on biodiversity. I mean, you sort of brushed it aside a little bit, say, oh, well, it came in too early and it was rather not triggered. We could have asked for it, surely. We could have asked for a biodiversity assessment predating the ploughed field, and if it's helpful, we can defer the application, can we? And require one? I don't know. But it seems to me, in the light of the council's broad policy and the planning policy generally, particularly in the local plan as it's being revised, the emphasis on biodiversity gain is huge, and we should not let any application go by without querying if it's not described. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak?
Only to help Councillor Pooley in terms of the biodiversity, the applications are accompanied by habitat information which identifies there's no harm in the first instance, but then those reports go on to propose various enhancements to the site. So that's your wish for improvements to biodiversity is included with the applications.
And that's demonstrable, is it?
There's a planning condition that requires those details. Number of conditions to deal with that.
So it was really not relevant to say that this predated or postdated the requirement, is that right?
It was relevant, Councillor Pooley, because biodiversity net gain and the 10% increase is a very specific piece of legislation, and these applications don't trigger that legislation at all because they predate it. So we are left dealing with what the applicant has done, which is assess what he's got, identify if there's any particular harm. There isn't, but then also propose some benefits back to the natural habitat, which is a perfectly acceptable approach for these applications.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's anyone else?
Sorry, the final point from me, I promise. Yes, you're right. Of course, we have to consider individual.
Carry on.
Pardon?
I didn't hear the beginning of what you said then.
I said, sorry, yes, this will be all, this is my last comment, I promise, is what I said. Yes, you can make it a minute of that, if you like. Yes, I think, I mean, we heard you loud and clear, Ms Hill-Sanders, that we have to look at each application on its merits, and of course we do, that's the law. But equally, you looked at all the application together. You looked at it all and you described it all and you wrote your reports as if all of the applications were to be considered together. Now, you also said, although you backtracked from it slightly, you also said that had it been one application, that would have triggered a number of things, although you later limited that to water. But I think that the way that you have looked at these 4 applications should trigger whatever other things a large application should trigger. Thanks.
Can I clarify something there? We were told that it predated that information being necessary, even if it was all 4. Am I right?
They're two different things, Chair. The applications predate biodiversity net gain legislation.
That's what I was
asking. That deals with the habitat 10%. All new applications submitted today that are anything...
You've got snakes first in the audience. That is wrong.
Sorry. The audience have had their say. Sorry. Can you please be quiet?
Okay. Individually, they are not major applications, so they predate BNG.
Right.
Okay. Does that help?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thanks. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, just another technical one, Chair. Sorry. Because we haven't triggered a large scheme, there has been no SUDS work which would be done or flood risk assessments. There could be deemed some concern if the brook was prone to flooding and the SUDS was incapable, that there could be an intensification of grey water, bound water effectively, from that number of animals in that space, just sort of uphill basically from one of our streams within our area. And that could lead to an intensification of certain minerals and nutrients getting into the water, which a SUDS management scheme would normally work to curtail the water and make sure that it either clean water does just dissipate to the ground, so it doesn't have the capability of washing foul into the stream, and grey water is managed on site. And I know particularly on this scheme they're not using a slurry process, effectively gathering the slurry and then taking all that contamination risk off-site. Therefore, if chemicals are used in the barn and if there is an additional amount of particular waste that is concentrating, that risk could be there, but because it's 4 separate schemes, we're not presented with an option to see more information and have the experts on. Have we done anything independent to see that at all? Thank you.
Is it covered in condition?
Chair, I'm not really sure where to go. First of all, if it were one site, we've checked the requirement for a flood risk assessment in terms of the MPPF guidance, and our understanding in it wouldn't trigger a flood risk assessment because it's in zone 1. We're talking theoretically about what ifs, you know, and as planning officers, we're always, you know, looking around things. We don't just look at things with our blinkers on. We're always looking around and looking at the possibilities. But at the end of the day, we've got 4 separate planning applications that don't trigger floods. So we haven't got that information. In terms of the concerns about pollution, etc. in watercourses, again, Keith, you know, talked about other legislation controlling pollution. The manure is collected. It's not slurry, it's manure. It's collected and taken away and sold. The water, that's all the wastage from animals on the field when they're roaming in the field. I believe I read somewhere that the nitrates are actually quite good for the grass. So I'm not aware that we've got a pollution problem that will result from cows using the fields.
Go.
Councillor Frascona.
Sorry, a couple of points. Firstly, you mentioned the manure being collected and taken away. That 250 cows are going to produce an awful lot of manure, so that's additional traffic movements, I assume, that weren't mentioned. And secondly, one of the residents brought to our attention this legal case against Canterbury City Council, all about whether development should be, whether individual separate applications should be considered separately or as one. Do you consider that irrelevant? Nobody's mentioned it. Because it seems to me this is obviously is one development, so it looks as though they're kind of going around finding a loophole by making 4 separate applications, basically.
William nodding at me at the other end there on the legal point, if he wants to come back.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, there are cases which have basically determined that yes, sometimes you do have to take the whole development into account. The case of Wingfield and Canterbury City Council 1991 is one such case, but it's concerned with environmental impact assessments. It's not relevant really to this sort of development. So yeah, with environmental impact assessments, sometimes it may be incumbent on the local planning authority to take into account what in effect is part of an integral bigger development, but as I say, that particular case is not applicable to this particular scenario. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, can I just wanted to... Hi.
Bear with us.
Sorry, Chair.
It's all right. Sometimes we need a minute. I think we've covered all
No,
the
one last
avenues.
question. Just want to add some numbers to it, Chair.
Sorry, what was it?
Yeah, so just want to understand, as part of the planning, is waste management part of planning as well? Is waste management in terms of manure? So just it's estimated that if there's about 200 cattle or something, it's about 20,000 pounds of manure. That's accumulates to about 600,000 pounds of manure in a month. So is there any waste management put in policies been looked into these kind of things when this planning was approved? Or is there any policies at all that looks into it?
Thank you. Councillor Fascona, can you turn your mic off?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Chair, we've got some cow numbers being bantered around or being referred to as 200 and something cows. I'm afraid I don't know where that information comes from. It's not within the application. So we have referred or looked at the previous planning application that was refused, and as part of the supporting information for the refused application for the 4 barns, the cow numbers were approximately 140. We as officers haven't said there are 200 plus cows on the site. In terms of waste management, the applicant has told us his waste management is that he takes the manure off every 5 approximate weeks from the site. I understand there's quite a value in animal waste in terms of selling it for manure, so why wouldn't you take it away and sell it? We have on occasion put planning conditions on about agreeing a waste management plan with an applicant it's quite a difficult planning condition to enforce though, because if they say they're going to take the manure off every 6th week and it happens to be the 7th week, are they in breach of that waste management plan? Again, coming back to Keith's point, there is other legislation that deals with pollution type issues. So should you ever get in a situation where there was too much waste on the site causing a problem, public health presumably would be stepping in and dealing with that.
That's as far as we can go.
Thank you, Officer.
We will have to draw this to a close shortly. Councillor Hall.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at the map up there, I'm wondering when they considered the position of the barns, whether it's possible, or they looked at it, whether they could move the 2 barns nearest the road aside the other 2 barns, just as a sort of recognition and compromise. I don't know if is there a reason that that was not looked upon?
No, we can only assess the application as presented to us. There are many iterations that the barns could be laid out in. It's for the applicant to propose what he feels is the best for his business, and we assess that. I hear what you're saying, but that's not what is before us this evening.
I didn't hear you that time. Yeah, I mean, in terms of what's before us, I do not feel comfortable approving this without further time for deliberation, to assess things, and in my case, to understand better what his record of good, safe farming is in other parts of the county. It seems to me that we do have a duty, not a planning duty, but clearly a duty, to address the concerns that residents have here, even if some of them are not planning considerations. And I just think that and I also have a point that I want to ask now about this lane. I mean, I've worked very hard before in introducing heavy goods vehicle restrictions on lanes of various types, and I wonder whether that's at all practical here, because it would certainly address some of the issues. So there's lots of questions that I still have before I would be prepared to vote in favour.
Thank you, Chair. Just so the committee is absolutely clear on the law, farming practice, farming management, agricultural practice is heavily regulated by a range of different legislation, but it's not actually a planning consideration, so it's not something that you should take into account when you are determining this application. And I say that because I don't want the committee to take into account any irrelevant consideration. I can understand that it's important, but it's governed by a completely different completely different legislative regime. And so I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
I quite understand that. I hope all of you do. Sorry. No, I'm in charge. I move that application 24-00386/FUL, land east of Ragged Robins, Lower Stock Road, West Hanningfield, Chelmsford, be approved subject to the conditions detailed on pages 51 to 54 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder. In that case, I will put it to the vote. All those in favour of the application? 3? Oh, sorry, I should have included myself. How many have we got? Sorry.
It's 4, Chair.
4, thank you. All those against? Now we have to go all through this properly, okay? So this does not mean it is fully complete. I'll wait till the end and then I'll explain the process. Item 8, I move that application 24-00387/FUL, land east of Ragged Robins, Lower Stock Road, West Hanningfield, be approved subject to the conditions detailed at pages 73 to 76 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lee. All those in favour? Same for. All those against? Shh. Come on, this is long and drawn out. Item 9. I move that application 24-00388/FUL, land east of Ragged Robins, be approved subject to the conditions detailed on pages 98 to 101 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? All those in favour? 3 this time. All those against? You having a number? Right, okay. The final one.
Sorry, Chair, I think you may have an abstention as well. I don't know if you want to ask for abstentions.
I assumed there weren't any, but my apologies if there were.
Councillor Armstrong
Councillor
hasn't
Pooley.
voted.
All right, Councillor Armstrong. Did that happen last time or not? Just this time. Just this time. On all of them.
I've noted it, don't worry.
That wasn't noticed, okay? Right, item 10. I move that application 24-00389/FUL, land east of Ragged Robins, be approved subject to conditions on pages 124 to 127 of the agenda pack. Do I have a seconder? I do. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? 2. Okay, in that case, we are minded to refuse. Sorry?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure you've had a motion that to do anything other than not accept the recommendation at the moment.
Yeah, no one has brought a motion to the contradiction. No one brought a motion to contradict the application. I sent it to approval. You've all either seconded or gone against it, and there were 2 abstentions, and that's all been covered.
Yeah, but a point of order, if I may. Keith is quite right that we haven't asked the committee yet to do anything about the fact that it has decided not to approve the application.
Right.
So I think if I were in your shoes, I would be asking
well, assuming everything will come back next time. But yes, okay. I will have to put a motion to refuse.
We can bring it back next time, Chair, but we don't know why we're bringing it back. So
okay, fair enough.
We need a steer. The committee have indicated that they don't wish to approve it. They haven't yet indicated that they would like to refuse it. It might be that they just don't have enough information or would defer it for more information.
But that's not what I voted for. I rejected the application.
Councillor Papa. Sorry, I can't hear you very well. Right. Who wishes to put a reason for refusal?
So I've said my reasons for refusal from start, from health point of view, from pollution point of view, and yeah, just a lot more other reasons I've listed out. So based on that, I would like to reject this application, and I voted in favour of rejecting the application, not postponing the application.
Okay.
The real point. What?
Councillor Pooley.
The real point is that we're always put in this position by Keith when we're asked to sum up all the reasons for refusal that he wants us to name, when in fact we've just had an hour and a half's debate when a number of possible reasons have been mooted, including...
Councillor Pooley, agree it will come back. Now,
Well,
please.
no, that's not what Keith is asking for.
We're asking for reasons.
Sorry, Chair, through you. We don't need, if members are minded not to approve the application, then we don't need to know a sort of definitive refusal reasons. But Councillor Papper has raised things like health and pollution. We would need to know whether those things are supported by the committee as a whole, because those are very difficult ones to defend. We would advise you we don't have the evidence to include those, but there might be other issues like the amenity, like the traffic, that members would like us to consider as well. We just need headlines, we don't need the detail, but we need to know which matters and whether the committee are actually proposing to defer this with a mind to refuse it, and that we would be asked to work on reasons for refusal on specific matters. We've heard a lot of different concerns. We just want the committee to agree on which ones we're being asked to consider reasons for refusal for, if that's the wish of the committee.
Councillor Frascona.
I would say definitely the traffic, and also the fact that it's such a large-scale development and it seems out of keeping on such a small field.
Okay, does that cover it? Councillor Hall?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My concern was there enough thought given to in the planning of and the shape of those buildings? I referred to it as a question, but you know, I'm supportive generally of farming, obviously as an industry, and it's in that area. But you know, can the applicant work with the local residents to make this more palatable to them? I think
Councillor Hall, it just has to be.
I'm sorry.
One sort of suggestion, and then the officers will take it away to flush it out. So you were talking about it being a different development. We have to look at what is here.
So here are some of my points here. This is Councillor Papa here. So just adding on to Councillor Julia, what she has said. So I would like to understand the intentions behind how the 4 applications has been made versus 1 application. It also triggers a little bit of alarm to me. On top of that, I'm also considering the health risk and then the amount of farming that will be done in that small place. And absolutely, the farming should be supported if the residence was not there. If the residents are there, the farming shouldn't be supported, taking all this into consideration.
Thank you. I think the officers have enough now to take away.
So, through you, Chair, we are simply deferring this until the next meeting, and officers will come back with...
That's what we have to do, because we have to get the detailed reasons correct. It's a legal process.
And we will provide advice and wording for reasons for refusal on the various topics that have been raised for the committee to consider next time.
Well, one other question here. So in case if I'm unable to present... No, sorry, I just want to understand how this process works. If in case I'm unable to make it for the event, can I mark my decision against now? Like in case if I'm unable to make up for the next one, just in case.
We can't.
Okay.
There are specific ways we will handle that.
All right, thank you.
So we don't need to deal with that now. Thank you. In that case, it has been deferred until a suitable meeting to consider the reasons for refusal.
Sorry, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I
Hang
just...
on. It is not being completely dealt with tonight. The same as the last application. It will have to come back.
Chair, can I just double check that the committee are happy with that for all 4 of the items?
That's all 4 applications. Okay. Councillor Pooley.
I just wanted to reassure residents in the light of the outburst just now. We are minded to refuse, and the committee has voted that way. So it needs to come back because only the officers can determine the legal phraseology for those reasons for refusal that they would be prepared to defend adequately with our help. So be reassured, we are minded to refuse, even though I abstained.
Thank you, Councillor Pooley. Thank you. In that case, that finishes that item for tonight. Thank you for everyone's attention.
See you next time.
It has. We have one more item, which is the planning appeals, which I'll leave with you. But we need to stay to finish because we have a meeting that I hope we can still do. Thank you, people.